The moment we launched this game, I swear something in the room shifted. It wasn't just us sitting there in front of a monitor anymore. It felt heavier. You know when the air changes and your stomach drops for no reason. That's what it felt like. And before you say it, no. It wasn't just the atmosphere or me hyping it up in my head. My friend sitting next to me leaned over and whispered, "Do you feel that?" We both laughed it off, but we couldn't shake it. This didn't feel like any normal horror game. Usually when you boot up a creepy indie, you expect the cliches, cheap jump scares, glitchy menus, maybe some distorted background music. Something predictable, something you can laugh about later. But this one, from the second the screen lit up, it didn't just feel like we were playing a game. It felt like the game was playing us. The title screen wasn't flashy. No spooky logo, no blood splatters, no creepy mascot glaring at us. It was just black, pure black. For a long time, I thought the game was broken. I even reached for the keyboard to reset it. But then, in the silence, I noticed something faint in my headphones. At first, I thought it was static. Just the kind of white noise your brain tunes out. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. They were whispers, low, broken whispers, the kind of whispers that don't sound like background ambience. They sound like they're meant for you. I leaned forward, straining to catch a word or two, and suddenly it clicked. They weren't whispers at all. They were prayers, ancient, broken prayers in a language I didn't recognize, and that's when my heart started racing. Because let's be honest, games don't pray to you. You're supposed to be the one in control, not the one being whispered at. But here it was, spilling into our headphones, pressing against the silence of the room. We laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. "Okay," I said, "we're probably just imagining it. Some creepy sound effect, nothing new. But I swear, I've played enough horror games to know when something feels off." And this didn't just feel off, it felt personal. I tried to brush it away. I joked with my friend, told him the devs must have thought they were clever. But when I glanced at him, he wasn't laughing. He just stared at the screen. Why? Died. He asked me if I saw it too. And for a second, I thought he was messing with me. But then I looked again, and I swear I saw movement. The black screen wasn't just black anymore. There was texture, shadows shifting, like smoke rolling behind the glass. I leaned in, so close my nose almost touched the monitor, and I whispered, "Do you see that?" He nodded. Slowly, neither of us breathed. That silence stretched forever. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, drowning out everything else. Finally, almost reluctantly, I pressed a key, and that was when it happened. The whispers stopped. Dead silence. Not even static anymore. The kind of silence that makes you aware of every sound in your own house. The fridge hum, the clock ticking on the wall, even the sound of your own breathing felt too loud, and right in the middle of that suffocating quiet, a single word appeared on the screen. Faith, that's it. No options, no start button, no credits, just that one word in white, sitting in the middle of black. We stared at it, waiting for something else to appear. Nothing. I moved the mouse. Nothing. I tapped keys. Nothing. My friend leaned in, muttering, "Dude, maybe it's broken." And then he laughed, too fast, too shaky. The kind of laugh you use when you're trying to convince yourself everything's fine. But here's the thing. Broken games don't breathe, and I swear on everything, I heard it, a low inhale, right in my ear, like someone had leaned over my shoulder. My entire body went rigid. My friend whipped his head around, searching the room, but of course there was no one there. Just us, just the screen, just that single word, faith. And that's when I knew this wasn't going to be a normal playthrough. We sat there staring at that single word on the screen, faith, nothing else. It wasn't a start menu. It wasn't a loading screen. It was like the game was testing us, waiting to see what we'd do next. My friend leaned closer and whispered, "Maybe it's one of those hidden key games. Try pressing something." So I did. I pressed. Enter, the screen flickered once like a heartbeat, and for the first time something changed. The black faded into a dimly lit room, and at first glance it looked like a chapel. Wooden pews lined in neat little rows, dust particles floating in the faint candlelight. For a second, I thought, okay, this is manageable. Creepy setting, sure, but nothing we hadn't seen before. But then the sound came. Low, hushed voices, and it wasn't coming from the speakers anymore. I swear, it sounded like the whispers were filling the actual room around us. My friend yanked off his headphones, convinced someone was standing behind us, but when he turned, just the wall, empty. That was the first time we laughed nervously, that awkward "we're fine, right" kind of laugh, but the longer we looked at the screen, the less funny it felt. The pews weren't empty. At first glance, yeah, they looked abandoned, but when I squinted, I realized the shadows weren't sitting still. They were moving, tiny, subtle movements like the dark shapes of people bowing their heads in prayer, dozens of them. But here's the thing, when I tried moving closer in the game, the pews emptied out. Every time I shifted forward, the shadows dissolved like smoke, vanished, and when I pulled back, they reappeared again, over and over, like they didn't want to be seen directly. I tried joking again, saying, cool effect, creepy shadows, classic horror vibe, but deep down, my chest was tight, because these shadows weren't random. They moved with rhythm. They moved together, kneeling, rising, bowing, the same way a real congregation would. The longer we sat there, the more it felt like we weren't the ones watching them. They were watching us. I tapped the keyboard again, searching for some kind of interaction. A door creaked open at the far end of the chapel, just wide enough to show a hallway beyond. No objective popped up, no instructions, just an open doorway like an invitation. I told my friend, "You ready?" He smirked, trying to mask his nerves, and muttered, "Yeah, let's get this over with." But I could hear the edge in his voice. His fingers tapped nervously against the desk. Mine weren't much steadier. As we stepped into the hallway, the sound changed. The whispers faded into something sharper, a rhythmic ticking, not from the game, from inside the game world itself, a clock. At first it was faint, tucked into the background, but the further we walked, the louder it became. Tick, tick, tick. Every step we took, the sound grew heavier, sharper, like the clock was following us instead of us finding it. Then the hallway lights began to flicker, first dim, then brighter, then gone altogether. The screen went black for just a second, and when it lit back up, we weren't in the hallway anymore. We were back in the chapel, only this time it wasn't empty. The pews were filled, not with shadows this time, no, with shapes, clearer now, dozens of figures dressed in robes. Heads bowed, hands clasped together in prayer, but their bodies, they didn't move naturally, too stiff, too synchronized. Their heads twitched slightly, like broken puppets forced into stillness. I tried moving closer again, hoping they'd vanish like before, but this time they didn't. They just stayed there, kneeling, staring at the ground, their whispers now loud enough that I could make out words that made no sense, but the tone felt like they were begging. My skin crawled. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck rising. My friend whispered, "Bro, don't go closer." And he never says that. He's usually the brave one, pushing us forward when I hesitate. But this time, his voice cracked. He sounded scared. I was about to back out, maybe even shut the game off entirely, when suddenly the ticking stopped. Dead silence. The robed figures all froze mid-breath. Not one moved. The candles flickered once, then steadied. For a heartbeat, everything felt like it was holding still, like the game itself was holding its breath, waiting. And then, just as my pulse started to calm, the giant clock appeared, not on the wall, not on a desk. It materialized right in the middle of the chapel, glowing red against the air. 10 minutes, a giant countdown timer, no explanation, no context, just numbers burning into the screen. We sat there frozen, trying to make sense of it. Was it a puzzle? A timer for survival? What happens when it hits zero? And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The robed figures were slowly lifting their heads. The figures in the pews began to lift their heads, one by one, in perfect unison. Their movements were jerky, stiff, like marionettes being pulled by invisible strings. I leaned in closer to the monitor, my pulse hammering in my ears, and I swear, though their faces were blurred in shadow, I could feel their eyes on me. Every single one of them. I froze with my hand hovering over the keyboard. My friend whispered, "Dude, you don't move." And honestly, I wanted to listen, because even though it was just a game, every instinct in my body screamed that if I moved even a little, they'd all come charging at us. But the timer was still ticking down. 9 minutes, 8 minutes, 7 minutes. We couldn't just sit there forever. So, against my better judgment, I edged the character forward, slowly, carefully. The wood of the pews creaked in game with every step, and it felt so real that my brain tricked me into hearing it in the room around us. My friend clutched his controller, so tight his knuckles went white. As we walked between the pews, the robed figures didn't attack. They didn't scream, they just followed us, their heads turned in perfect rhythm, always in our direction, never blinking. Imagine 50 people staring you down silently, praying under their breath, and you'll get the idea. And then it hit me, they weren't whispering anymore. They were chanting, not English, not Latin, not anything I could recognize. But the sound carried a weight. It rumbled in my chest, like a choir singing from the bottom of a cave. Each voice layered on top of the other, until it was impossible to tell how many were chanting. The timer ticked down to 6 minutes. The chanting grew louder, my heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat. We thought maybe the goal was to reach the end of the chapel before the timer hit 0. So I pushed forward, forcing the character to walk faster. That's when the first candle blew out, one flame near the back. Then another, like a wave rolling forward. The light was snuffed out row by row until we were swallowed in darkness. The only glow left came from the timer, casting everything in that eerie red light. The robed figures were nothing but silhouettes now, their chanting echoing like a storm closing in. "We should quit," my friend muttered, his voice cracked. He wasn't joking this time, he wanted out. And for the first time I wanted out too, but I didn't press escape. I didn't shut it down, because something in me needed to know. Needed to see what this game was building toward, so I kept walking, and that's when we noticed something new. Every few steps, the shadows would shift. At first, it looked like nothing, just shapes moving along the walls. But when I stopped to really look, I realized what they were. Figures, faint, smoky silhouettes slipping between the pews, too tall, too thin to be human. They didn't walk, they crawled on all fours, their limbs bent at wrong angles, dragging themselves across the chapel, closer and closer each time the candles went out. I whispered, "Do you see that?" My friend didn't answer. He just stared, frozen, mouth slightly open. His breathing had gone shallow, like he was afraid the game could hear him. The timer hit 4 minutes. And suddenly, boom, the chapel doors slammed shut behind us, loud enough that it made both of us flinch in real life. I yanked my headphones off, but the sound still rang in my ears. My friend cursed under his breath, gripping the desk, eyes wide. He thought someone had actually slammed a door in our house. The chanting stopped. Dead silence again. Every robed figure turned their head toward us in unison, and then slowly, painfully slowly, they began to rise from the pews. Not standing like normal people. Their bodies jerked and cracked like they hadn't moved in years, bones snapping, joints twisting out of place. One by one, they shuffled into the aisle, closing it off, blocking the way forward. I didn't even realize it, but I was holding my breath. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. My friend whispered, "We're trapped." The timer ticked down to 3 minutes. That's when the crawling shadows stopped hiding. They slithered into the red glow of the timer. And for the first time, we saw their faces. The shadows crawled out of the darkness and into the sickly red glow of the timer. And that's when we saw their faces, or what was left of them. Their skin looked stretched too thin, almost translucent, veins pulsing beneath it. Eyes hollow, but wide like they'd been forced open and couldn't close anymore. Mouths twisted into a shape that wasn't. Quite a smile wasn't quite a scream. Their jaws dangled slightly open, teeth grinding as if they were chewing on nothing. And worse, they didn't look like monsters. They looked like people. People who had been stuck here far too long. My throat went dry. My friend actually pushed back in his chair, like he wanted to put distance between himself and the screen. I wanted to laugh it off, to say, nice design, creepy NPCs, but this didn't feel like a design choice. The way their heads twitched, the way their eyes never blinked, the way the sound seemed to echo outside the game itself, it felt too real. The timer ticked down, 2 minutes, 50 seconds. I gripped the keyboard tighter, trying to steer our character around them, but they mirrored our movements. Every turn we took, every sidestep, they shuffled in perfect rhythm, keeping us boxed in. The pews that had once been open paths now looked like traps, closing us in tighter and tighter. Then the whispers returned, not chanting, not prayers. This time they were voices I recognized. My friend's voice, my voice. The game whispered them back at us in distorted tones, repeating things we had said earlier that night. Little phrases we'd thrown out without thinking, like maybe it's broken or don't move. Hearing your own words echoed back in some garbled, guttural voice. Yeah, that's when my skin went cold. Timer ticked down to 2 minutes. The screen flickered, once, twice. For a second, I thought my monitor was dying, but then I realized it wasn't just the game glitching. The room we were sitting in, the actual room, the lights above us began to flicker too. My friend swore under his breath, checking behind him, but I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, because with every flicker, the robed figures grew closer. One frame they were standing by the pews, next frame they were right in front of us. The distance between us vanished with every blink until they were just inches away, their hollow eyes burning into mine through the screen. The timer hit 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then static. The entire screen went white. Noise static for maybe half a second, just long enough for me to see something in it, a face, not pixelated, not modeled like an actual face, caught in a photograph, and it was staring directly at me. My friend ripped off his headset. Nope, that wasn't. In the game, that wasn't code. I didn't move. I couldn't move. My fingers hovered above the keys, frozen, like if I pressed the wrong button, something would spill out of the screen. The static cut out. The chapel was empty again. No robed figures, no crawling shadows, just us, just silence. And then we noticed the timer. 30 seconds left. My friend muttered, "What happens when it hits 0?" He tried to laugh, but it came out shaky, broken. I wanted to say something reassuring, something dumb-like, probably just a jump scare. But the truth, my gut told me it was worse than that. Much worse. 20 seconds. The whispers returned, louder this time, deafening, like dozens of voices pressed up against the glass of the monitor, screaming to be let out. My ears rang. My chest tightened. 15 seconds. The camera and game locked. We couldn't move anymore, couldn't look away. The screen zoomed slowly toward the altar at the front of the chapel, where something was waiting. A tall shape, cloaked in darkness, arms stretched wide like it was welcoming us. 10 seconds. My friend's hands shook so hard the controller clattered onto the desk. I tried pressing every key I could, desperate to back out, but the game ignored me. It wanted us to watch. It wanted us there. 5 seconds. The whispers became screams. The candles exploded, one by one, bursting into sparks that filled the chapel with blinding red light. 3 seconds. The figure at the altar stepped forward. Its face was still hidden, but I could feel its eyes on me, not on the character, on me. 2 seconds. My stomach dropped. My skin burned cold. 1 second, and then darkness. The timer disappeared. The screen went pitch black. No sound, no whispers, nothing. Just me, staring at my own reflection in the monitor, and for a heartbeat I thought it was over, that maybe it was just a weird cutscene. But then the game spoke, not with chanting, not with whispers. It spoke my name. When the game spoke my name, I swear every hair on my body stood on end. It wasn't just text on the screen. It wasn't a robotic, synthesized voice. It was my voice, distorted, echoing, like it had been pulled straight from my microphone and thrown back at me through the speakers. My friend looked at me. Why? Died. Tell me you heard that, he whispered. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. He wasn't even trying to be the tough one anymore. Before I could respond, the game said his name too, same voice, same distortion. It dragged his name out in a horrible broken way like the sound of a cassette tape being chewed up. That's when he reached for the keyboard. I'm shutting this down, forget this. But the second he hit escape, nothing happened. The menu didn't pop up, the mouse wouldn't move, the keyboard locked up completely, we weren't in control anymore, and then the screen lit up again. The black faded into an image of the chapel, except now it looked burned, charred wood, ash floating in the air, pews splintered and broken. The robed figures were gone, but something worse had replaced them. Shadows, dozens of them, crawling along the floor, and walls stretching longer than they should, bending at angles that didn't make sense. Their movements weren't synced anymore. They twitched violently, like they were trying to tear themselves free from the walls, and in the center of it all the altar, only now there was a body on it, a person, bound by ropes, struggling. The screen shook as they writhed, muffled screams echoing from speakers. I leaned in, squinting, trying to figure out if it was just a generic NPC. But the longer I stared, the colder I felt, because the face looked too familiar, not perfectly clear, not high resolution, but close enough that I swore it looked like me. I laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Okay, creepy trick. Procedural face generation, whatever. But my friend wasn't laughing. He just whispered, "That's you, bro, that's you on the altar." I wanted to argue, to say he was wrong, but the body twitched again, turning its head slightly, and that's when I saw the scar on its eyebrow, the exact same scar I had, the one I got when I was 12. I went cold, completely numb, and then the lights in our room flickered again, this time longer, darker. We froze, staring at each other, silently asking the same question. Was the game messing with reality? The body on the altar screamed again. The shadows all stopped moving. They turned toward us, and then the timer came back. But this time it didn't count down. It counted up, 1, 2, 3, climbing higher, faster, the red numbers flashing violently against the screen. With every tick, the voice repeated our names. Over and over, louder, angrier. It felt like the game wasn't keeping time anymore. It was measuring us. My friend grabbed the power button on the PC. He slammed it down, nothing. The fans were louder, the monitor glowed brighter. The game wasn't running on hardware anymore. It was running on something else. "This isn't right," he muttered. "This isn't a game anymore." And then, our character froze in place, completely stuck. Couldn't move, couldn't turn, couldn't even blink. The altar flared in white light. The body vanished. And for a second, the screen reflected us again. Me and my friend sitting there, exactly as we were. I couldn't breathe, because on screen we weren't alone. There was a third figure standing behind us, tall, cloaked, motionless. It didn't move, didn't breathe, it just stood there watching. I whipped my head around so fast I nearly snapped my neck. But the room was empty, just us, no one behind us. I turned back to the screen. The figure was still there, closer now, right behind my chair in game. The whispers surged louder, building into screams. The shadows on the walls reached out, stretching toward us. My chest tightened so hard I thought I was about to pass out. The counter kept climbing, 30, 31, 32, and then the game crashed. Desktop, blank, silent. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We just sat there, breathing hard, staring at the empty screen. And then, just as I thought maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. My speakers crackled. A low, broken voice whispered, "We're not done yet." We sat frozen, staring at the desktop. Nothing was open. No game, no sound, no visuals, just our wallpaper. But the speakers, they didn't stop. That whisper, low and broken, repeated again, "We're not done yet." My friend shot me a look, half terrified, half demanding an explanation. Like I could somehow make sense of it. I couldn't. My brain was scrambled, heart pounding so hard it hurt. We waited 10 seconds, 20, nothing, just silence. And then out of nowhere the file appeared, a single icon, sitting dead, center on my desktop. Wandering Faith, MP3. I didn't download it. I didn't install anything. The game had never even asked for storage access. But there it was, staring back at me like bait. "Don't," my friend muttered. His voice cracked. "Don't open it." "But you know me." Curiosity is a curse. My hand shook as I clicked the file, the audio that played. I will never forget it. It wasn't music. It wasn't ambience. It was me, my voice, not speaking, praying, prayers I had never said in my life. Foreign words, but in my exact tone, my cadence. It was like hearing a recording of myself from some alternate reality. My stomach dropped. I slammed the speakers off, but the sound didn't stop, because now it was coming from behind us. We spun around. Nothing, just the room, but the whispers were louder than ever, circling us, like a swarm of voices pressed against the walls. Then the monitor flickered back on by itself. Not the desktop this time, not the game. It was a webcam feed. Our webcam live. We saw ourselves sitting there, staring in horror. Except there was something wrong with the feed. The footage was delayed, just by a second, and in that second delay, I swear I saw things in the background. Things moving, a shadow darting past the doorway, a figure lingering behind my chair, just out of reach. My friend grabbed the webcam, yanked it out of the port, tossed it across the room. The feed didn't vanish. It kept streaming as if the camera was still connected, and then the screen went black again. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe, just maybe, that was it. That we had survived it. But then words began to type themselves across the monitor, line by line in white text. Faith wanders, faith finds, faith follows. We both leaned back, eyes wide. My chest felt hollow. The final line appeared. We are already inside. The PC shut off completely. No lights, no fans, no nothing, dead. And for the first time that night, we sat in silence, just the sound of our own breathing. The room felt heavier than ever, like something else was sitting there with us. Finally, my friend stood up, shoved his chair back, and muttered, "I'm done. Never again. Whatever this is, we're not touching it." He stormed out of the room, and I didn't even try to stop him. Because deep down, I agreed. But curiosity, it never lets go, does it? Because later that night, when I finally worked up the courage to check my files again, I found something waiting. A folder, buried deep, hidden inside layers of random junk data. Inside it, hundreds of audio clips. Not of me, not of my friend, of people I didn't know. All of them praying, all of them begging, all of them whispering the same thing at the end. Don't let it wander. I deleted the folder. I deleted